News Center in high definition. This is News Channel 8 on your side at 5:30.
Now, today's high court decision affects just about every American. Joining us now is Tampa attorney Ed Waller, and he's here to break down the details of the high court's ruling. And first of all, let me thank you for joining us tonight.
Sure.
Secondly, Ed, let me ask you, can you explain the details of today's ruling, and why did the justices decide exactly what they decided?
Okay. Well, first, let me just show you that this is the ruling. It's 190 pages. But the first thing the court did, Justice Roberts felt like he needed to explain the role of the court. And so what he did was explain that the court doesn't decide whether the decision is good or bad, or whether they agree with the wisdom of it or whatever. But what the court does is look to see whether or not there's a constitutional basis for the law. And so then when he turned to the substance of the decision, Justice Roberts first talked about this individual mandate. And he said that initially, or ruled that initially, the individual mandate does not have a basis in the Commerce Clause because the people are compelled to engage in commerce. But he did look then at the mandate and decided that there is a constitutional basis under the Constitution's power to tax. Then the court looked at part of the Medicaid expansion, and in looking at that, determined that there was a threat to the states to withhold funding, all of the Medicaid funding, if they did not participate, and determined that that part of the Medicaid expansion was unconstitutional. But then finally determined that it was severable from the rest of the act, and therefore, even though that was unconstitutional, the rest of the act remained constitutional.
And talking about the mandate, how did the justices basically justify the mandate that requires everyone to buy insurance?
Well, the court, maybe semantics, but what the court determined was that people weren't required to purchase. What they interpreted to mean that the tax was imposed on people if they chose not to purchase.
And then in terms of if you don't buy insurance, there is a penalty that will be imposed on you. How did basically they call that a tax and not a penalty?
Okay, what happened is, I guess the old rubric is that if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then it's a duck. And so he said even though it's called a penalty, it was a tax. And he pointed to the fact that the tax is, what is the penalty or tax? It's paid to the IRS, first of all. Second of all, it's based on taxable income of people. It's based on the number of dependents and the joint filing status. And then finally, he says it does produce revenue. It's anticipated to produce up to $4 billion a year starting in 2017.
And then part of the law was found to be unconstitutional, the part dealing with the expanding Medicaid. So why did the justices rule differently on that part of the law?
Okay, what he looked at, and the court used the term, it was like holding a gun to the head of the states, because the threat to the states was that all of their Medicaid funding would be lost if they chose not to participate. And they said that was not workable, that was unconstitutional.
Attorney Ed Waller, thank you very much for joining us and giving us a little more explanation in terms of what the justices did today.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Well, now that the highest court in the land